we have Melinda Harrison. Melinda Harrison in 2013, executive coach and an Olympian. Melinda Harrison set a goal to interview 100 people who had positively transitioned from significant achievements to discover new goals and meaning in another area of their life. Melinda Harrison, I'm excited to have her on the show. Melinda, welcome to the show.
Much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so I got to ask you, what brought this curiosity about? What was like, the whole book,
Yeah.
and what got all this started?
So in 2012, 2013 was one of those messy middle periods for me. My dad had died of cancer. My youngest child went off to college, and then in January of 2013. A neighbor of mine, a fellow Olympian, died by suicide. And I sat back and I went, wow, how can somebody that appeared on the outside to be so incredibly successful in his post-sport life do that? And so, I contemplated this. I was an executive coach. I was contemplating, well, how can I add value to the world now that all this, my children were all off in college or working. And so during a meditation weekend, I actually came up with this idea. Well, if I could interview 100 people that positively had done it, what would I learn? And that's kind of how athletes look at other athletes. They look at how athletes go, that are better than them. How do they do that? And then they try and mimic and copy them and then advance a skill set. So, I just took my athletic mindset and thought, okay, I'm going to interview 100 people. Little did I know what that was going to be like.
Well, you know what? And I think right there is one of those principles of success that a lot of people overlook. If you look at somebody and if they did it, then there's a chance that you can do it. And of course, if let's say 10 or 20 or 100 people have done it, then there's a good probability that you certainly can do it. There's always the analogy of the 4-minute mile. Everybody's trying to do the a 4-minute mile and they're failing at it until, what's his name, Jim something, or I think it was Jim. Anyway, somebody finally runs that 4-minute mile and then everybody starts to run a 4-minute mile. So it is, I think, a principle of success that you mimic or you model somebody that's done what you're trying to achieve, and you kind of follow those footsteps to get there, bigger, better, faster.
Right. And it was really important to me that I didn't just take my own lens of being an Olympian and my own experience of transition. I really wanted to know from the best of the best how they did it. And so I just started calling up people and asking them.
All right. So from the time that you had this idea until the time that you, got the book done, how much time did that take?
Well, the book was published in April, just a couple of weeks ago. And so it was, 7.5 years.
Okay. So really from 2013 you got that idea. Okay. Just want to make sure. All right. And is there a standout lesson or two, a couple of aha moments that maybe surprised you or shocked you from the people that you interviewed?
Yeah, there were lots of them actually, but one of them was that every single one, you look at these individuals and they're all listed in the back of the book. You look at them and you think, wow, they're just so famous or so successful. Every single one of them went through a struggle, every single one of them. And so, when I think about why it was so important to get this message out, is that I want people to understand that you're not alone, that there's a process of being really good, a personal best in something. And as you discover what your personal next is, there's a process that you need to go through.
Yeah. All right. So again, the book, as you guys see there, is Personal Next. And I love that. Not personal best, personal next. Yes. I thought that was a great play on words. What we can learn from elite athletes navigating career transitions. So what are some of the things that you learned that are applicable, let's say, to the audience today, to entrepreneurs, to people who want to transition, trying to get to that personal next?
Right. So, I think one of the most important things is that you live the transition, that you don't just go on autopilot and hope that you'll create something anew. It's really important that you take control of it, that you understand the process that you're going through, and that you actually sometimes need to ask for help to get through that process.
Gotcha. So basically, you're saying you have to have kind of like a transitional plan or a transition plan, right? It's this, my goal is to whatever, write a book or start a new career. What are the steps to get there? An active role in the transition.
Right. Most people are in such a state of either denial, or anxiety or depression or feeling lost or feeling left out, all of those negative emotions, that they struggle to actually think, well, what actually do I want going forward? Because they're so stuck in the place that they're at. So when you start to realize and understand and have awareness around the stages that you might go through, then you can say, yeah, that's me. Okay, I can do it. I've done it before. I can do it again. But if you don't have that awareness, you can't possibly take control of it.
Yeah. You and I were talking before the show about some of the traps that some of these athletes, and really there's no age barrier. We talked about some of the children, young athletes and celebrities that sometimes, go awry, right? I mean, people look at these athletes, again, whether they're children or adults, and they go, well, how did that happen? How did somebody who was so rich and famous end up here, or end up so broke, or end up in jail? And it is really, I think, for most people to understand that just because you're good and, let's say, rich and famous, for lack of better terms, or good and famous at one area, doesn't mean it's going to transition into the rest of the parts of your life.
Right. Especially children that become actors or actresses, children that become athletes, they're very socialized from a young age to be pulled along by a system. So whether that system is, showing up for practice at a certain time, or, getting tutored on the side outside of sport or acting, when that system collapses, so too does everything else in that person's life, because they don't know any different. So we all contribute to this aspect of an athlete or an actress or a dancer or anybody else that strives for high performance as a child and moves up that rank. They don't know any different. And we briefly talked about this idea that all of those individuals are they've been compared since a very young age to other people. And because of that comparison, they are judged. And then they self-judge themselves. And then in turn, to get out of that judgment, they work towards gaining approval from others and trying to get recognition. And as I said, that whole system collapses. And so too can the individual's self-worth.
Yeah. And at least in my experience, I probably don't have the depth of knowledge that you have, but I see this with a lot of Hollywood celebrities. There is this thing in place, and there are some Hollywood celebrities that don't even write their own schedule. They're just told where to show up and stuff like that. And hey, you go from rehearsal to publicity meeting to charity event to the next event. And when those wheels start to fall off, they are lost. And so it can happen, I think, at any age. And I think that this approval system is, I think, the kind of one of those horrible things that if somebody is not aware that it's, I guess, creeping up on them, or that it's what's the word I'm looking for? Invading their life,
Yeah.
that it really hurts them so much. You have to, I don't know, train your brain to not care what, what the naysayers are saying, or to just kind of live your life, and you put your blindfolds on and you just kind of go for what it is that you want to do, because that fame thing is so fickle and so short.
Approval is hard. And the number one thing that when I talk about approval is, how are you approving of yourself?
Yes.
Because if all you're ever searching for is approval or recognition from other people, then, when all of that approval and recognition stops, you don't really know who you are. And
Yeah.
that's a problem. And so, if you look at an athlete that, goes bankrupt, well, they're still spending like they're a professional athlete, and they're trying to gain the approval of all their friends and
Yeah.
all the people around them. They haven't adjusted because they're not aware that their behavior is driven by the socialization they've had since age 3. And so we need to step back as coaches, not just as, executive coaches or transition coaches, but as coaches in sport, and really try and get these athletes to acknowledge their own accomplishments and their own mistakes, to own what they're doing, instead of searching for other people to recognize what they're doing.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And so I want to back up a little bit, because you said, from the age of 3, and maybe even from the age of 2 or whatever, but, from an early age. So how can we as parents help our children to start looking for that approval, to stop wanting that approval? How do we do that? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So naturally, what happens when, we also got viral baseball picture of that little kid where the dad was jumping up and down. He's 5 years old. He hits his first home run, and the dad is jumping up and down, going nuts. So the kid goes, I like this. My dad's jumping up and down and showing me that I'm great. So what happens when that child stops doing that? They equate the love and approval with their father, and the absence of that makes them feel less worth. And so what, as a parent, can we do? You can ask your child, what did you do great about that? Ask the child to say what was good, not you tell them it was good, and then they seek more of that good.
Yeah, so they start to actualize that or internalize that for themselves, and they can say, you know what, I like the fact that I hit that home run, or I like the fact that I, whatever, I did well in that audition or got that part or whatever, as opposed to, you're right, getting your parents or third parties to jump up and down and what do you call it, layer it on so thick.
Right. And you're naturally going to get that. You're naturally
Yeah.
proud of your child. I'm not saying don't do it.
Right.
But I'm saying at the same time, simultaneously make sure that the child realizes what they did, and they did it not for approval, but because they've been working at it. They've been working hard at it. They're in control of their destiny.
Yes. So, and maybe in some cases, link it to the work that they've done to get there, right? So, so if your child is in sports, you can, you reward them for, hey, you worked so hard. Look what you did because of your hard work. You're putting in the practice. You got X, Y, Z. That's great. You should feel good about yourself, or you should, or you got the part because of all the other, again, all the rehearsing that you did. Congratulations. You did a great job. I like that. Make it about, as you said, have them internalize it. In your book, Personal Next, you talk about the messy middle.
Yeah.
What is the messy middle?
So I love that term because it gives you this feeling that, life is not a straight line. I had one of my interviewees give this great metaphor, and what she said was, if you flip over a rug, a woven rug, you see all sorts of loose strands, and some of those loose strands are failures, some of them are successes, some of them are dead ends, but in the end, when you flip it back over, you see this beautiful pattern, and you're able to see how your life has evolved because of all those loose strands. That messy middle are all those loose strands. It's when you question whether you can keep doing something. I call that gut checks. It's when you start to unravel that thread that you created from a very young age and start to think, well, how am I going to ravel a new thread? And then it's that feeling of deep loss of being on the outside looking in at other people that are still doing what you're doing. And this applies not just to athletes, it applies to anybody that has experienced the personal best, whether in a business career, a entertainment career, or an athletic career.
Yeah, I like that. Let me ask you this: as an Olympian and as a coach and executive coach, do you believe in the term self-sabotage? Do you think that as humans, I don't know, we move forward and we hit this this level of success that we're not comfortable with, and so we either turn the other way or we do something to sabotage it? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I would say there are people that bounce up to a line. So they'll
Right.
bounce up to here, but in order to go to that next level, they have to take a risk. And if their whole life has been on proving, let's say, how smart they are, they've always gotten A's, to put them into another category of someone that is going to really push that level of intelligence, they have to take the risk that they might not be as intelligent as they thought they were. And so that is how you can self-sabotage. And that goes back to this ideal that we're constantly told how good we are. And so the fear is we're not so good. And so we have to get away from that.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was talking to we were in a podcasting mastermind, me and some other people in the podcasting realm, and somebody brought up the fact that he's been doing his podcasting show and for a couple of years, and he's just not gaining any ground. He was just he can't get anybody, quote, big on his show. He's not getting big numbers, big downloads, or a lot of listenership, and there was some different thoughts for that, and I quite frankly said, I don't think I necessarily have big numbers either, and the reality is maybe it's me, maybe it's my marketing or lack thereof, maybe it's my maybe I don't understand what my audience wants. It maybe the content that I'm delivering isn't, I don't know, it isn't as good. I mean, whatever it is, it could be the reality. Back to what you're saying, you're not that smart. You're not that good. You have to get off your butt and get to the next level. And some people just don't want to hear that. They want to hear that it's, hey, because you don't know the secret.
Right.
The secret is you have to either reinvent yourself, you got to get off your butt, you got to work harder, and nobody wants to hear that, including me. I don't want to hear that, but the reality, sometimes that's what it is.
It's so true. And I mean, that's why in the book, I talk about the 9 practices, because, in a personal best, again, thinking about the athlete realm, you're pulled along by this system and these practices naturally happen. But in that messy middle, it's the absence of these practices. And then as you move into a personal next, it's re-engaging with these, taking responsibility and re-engaging with these 9 practices. And so in your example of being a podcaster and trying to gain audience, what are the things you are doing in any one of these practices that you're constantly working on and developing to get to that next level. Because 9 of them, it takes work. They don't just happen.
Yeah, and interesting because again, in the same mastermind, one of the things that I pointed out is Tim Ferriss, who's, I don't know, 2 or 3 time New York Times bestselling author.
Right.
And I said, Tim Ferriss spends a sizable amount of money. I'm not sure how much it is, but he spends a sizable amount of money promoting his books on Twitter, using Twitter ads, actual advertising on Twitter and Facebook, maybe LinkedIn. I've not seen him on LinkedIn, but I have seen him on Facebook and Twitter where he's promoting his book. He is spending money to get us to buy his books.
That's commitment.
The commitment, yeah. And here's the guy that a lot of people are shocked with. Wow, he's a New York Times bestselling author. You don't think that he'd have to do that? Well, maybe that's why he's a New York Times bestselling author, because he's investing. He's committed to getting it out there. And,
right.
It just doesn't stop. I mean, it's just one of those things. So let's review these 9 practices real quick. If you have me intrigued, if you can run them down real quick, what are they?
So P stands for proficiency, and that really is constantly gaining new skills, using your aptitudes, and challenging yourself to grow and learn. The R stands for regulation, and that's being self-regulated enough that what your goal is matters more than the party you want to go to. It means that you have to commit to the schedule that you think you need to own to get to where you want to get to. A stands for attitude, and that's in the case of the podcaster, I just haven't done it yet. I need to keep trying and figuring out how I can get to that next level. C stands for commitment, and that is the commitments you make every day to develop and grow. PRACT stands for being tuned in. This was one of the really big surprises that I had in the research, that a large percentage of the interviewees that had successfully had a personal best and went on to a personal next, they were very concerned about being tuned in or contributing to people or adding value to a cause larger than themselves. In other words, it wasn't about them. I stands for identity, and identity is having that sense of awareness about who you are, not just what you do. C stands for confidence, and that is the ability to know in a moment where you can act with confidence and have a deep belief or self-efficacy in your skill sets. E stands for emotions, and this is a really important one too, that you can step back and control your emotions in those tense situations so that you get the results that you want. And S stands for secure base, and that's having people that you trust around you so that you can be vulnerable and discover or bounce above that line, as we were talking earlier, not have the fear because people have your back.
Yeah, I love that. I like that acronym. That's awesome. And that's applicable to everything in life.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I like that. I like that.
And overall, we have to practice all of these things all the time.
All the time.
That's why it's hard to be great at anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to you talk about, the confidence and the emotion and the identity. And I've been reading quite a bit about Elon Musk. And here's a guy that, was told over and over again, there's just no way that you're going to make this happen. And so one of his first crazy ideas was to have a mapping directory very similar to Google Maps today. And so he created this thing. It was called Zip2, as in zip to here, zip to there. And he was told, hey, it's not going to work. The internet doesn't have the technology, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that was like his first thing. A lot of people don't know about it. And he sold it for whatever, 20 million bucks or whatever. And then from there, he went on to, for no reason at all, he decided, banking needs to get on the internet. And he started an actual digital bank. It's called X.com. And then he ended up connecting with the guys from PayPal, and it merged into PayPal and all that other stuff. And so all, along these steps, when he thinks of something big and bold like PayPal or SpaceX or Tesla, he's always told you can't do it. It's going to take too much money, right. All this stuff. Right. But again, listening to you, he knows who he is. He's confident in who he is. He's got the emotional intelligence. He's committed, right?
Right.
He's on the verge of bankruptcy and he finally makes SpaceX work.
Right.
And you can hear my dog here, and usually she's in the other room, but we have to put up with a live. So, but that's what it takes to be great. You have to practice these 9 practices, because otherwise you're just good. And sometimes good is okay, but there's a lot of good out there. There's a lot of good people. But if you want to get to be excellent or great, you really have to you have to be committed. Yeah. You have to know all these things.
Right. And you have to be willing to have people around you and accept advice and accept criticism. Yeah. That will drive, you think about your example. I mean, the criticism that he got drove his emotions to learn more. So that's the proficiency, and say, watch me. That's his attitude.
Yeah.
And it's, another interesting thing that came up for me as you were talking was this whole idea of fear. And, I require all my clients to complete an exercise, which I call, what would you do if you were not afraid? And so that's a really interesting thing to ask yourself, that question. What would you do if you were not afraid? So obviously the first thing that comes to mind is, what on earth am I afraid of?
And what's interesting is people have different labels for their fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid. I just don't have the time. I'm not afraid. I just don't have the money.
Yep.
And it's like, you have to, kind of, we all have fears. I don't care if you're, Mickey Mantle or Mickey Mouse, doesn't matter how successful you are. You're going to have some fear. Something back there is holding you up.
Yeah, but isn't that great? Because now at least you know what they are.
Yes.
Right. And so, you can't do anything about your fears if they lurk back here.
Right.
At the moment that you realize, okay, when I do this exercise quite often, but I'll tell you a quick little funny story. When I did it back in 2013, one of the things that I wrote down, so I just turned 50, and I wrote down, I don't want to be that wrinkled 75-year-old person that feels so entitled driving around that they won't let anybody merge. And that was something that came out of this exercise, because it's quite in depth how you go about discovering these different layers of fear. Yeah. But what does that really tell me? That I don't want to be entitled, I don't want to be irrelevant, and I want to figure out how I can make a difference in the world. And that drove part of the reason I wrote this book.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Mine, that I don't want to be wrinkled either, but I will be.
I guess, if you weren't if you were disposed to having tons and tons of plastic surgery, I guess we could always put it off, right? We can.
Yeah.
I always do this. Wow, if I just do a little bit here, look at that. I'm already 10 years young.
That doesn't bother me, but what you see is what you get with me. People will learn that.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm a big fan of Betty White.
Yeah.
I think Betty White is glamorous and gorgeous. She's still funny. She's still relevant. She's consistently working in movies and shows, and she's got this, to me, and I don't know her personally, but she seems to have a great attitude about life. And, she had, at least I'm not aware that she spent any money or on plastic surgery. To me, she's a great role model of just, you keep doing what you love to do until you can't do it anymore.
Right. And she, when you say that, like, she tries different things.
Yes.
She's constantly evolving. She's constantly living a transition to get to a new personal next. And then she will live another transition. We all go through these transitions. In fact, we go through many of them in our lives. Some are more gut-wrenching than others.
Yes.
But, we do go through them. So when you're in one, start by recognizing what it is. Don't call it something that it isn't. It is a transition, and yes, you will get through it.
Yeah, and I think that's what a perfect statement for the transition that we're going through today.
Right.
With all the stuff with COVID and coronas and how schools have been affected and business has been affected and all the stuff, it is nothing more than a transition. And transition is the constant in the universe, right? There is no standing still. You're constantly evolving. Maybe you're going backwards, but I think that if you are, back to what you said earlier on the show, if you are really involved in your transition, then you're kind of deciding which way your transition is going to go, as opposed to, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, I didn't see that coming. Oh, this is a complete surprise. No, you got to be constantly in your transition.
Right. And isn't that a different way to look at it?
Yes, it is.
It's not like this. I mean, it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be ugly. If you're going through a divorce, it can be really ugly. That's a transition. And it can be very uncomfortable. But it also can be freeing and exciting. Because you get to reinvent yourself.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about moving from one city to another city that nobody knows you is that you can completely reinvent yourself with new stories and new friends and just be completely free. It's a great little gift. It
is a gift. We have to look at it as a gift. We have to look at every day as a gift. My God, there's, over 80,000 Americans. I can't tell you how many Canadians, well over 100,000 North Americans that have died.
Yeah.
We need to step back and be grateful that we're alive and that we can add value to the world and that we have choice to add value to the world.
Yeah. So I got this the other day. I forgot who sent it to me. The quote was, the first thing that we need to be thankful for is that we're awake.
Yeah. It's true.
It's true. It really is. Melinda, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for stopping by. The book, again, I love it. Personal Next, what we can learn from elite athletes navigating career transitions. It's a great book. And you can get it at melindaharrison.com or at amazon.com. I'm going to put a link here in the show notes. Melinda, thank you so much. Looking forward to catching up with you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you, and stay healthy, and I'll look forward to our next time.
Absolutely. Good stuff there. Thank you so much. I learned a lot today from Melinda Harrison. Again, melindaharrison.com. I'm going to put up the website here in case I'm not there it is, melindaharrison.com. Check her out. Executive coach, speaker, author. And, I love this because personal next. great play on words, something that we have to keep in our minds, and that we're constantly living a transition. Friends, please, let's share this episode with everyone you know. Let's get everybody thinking about their personal next. The fact that we're constantly in transition and that it's just the normal part of life. Check out Melinda's book, Personal Next. I'm going to put the links here in the notes. And remember, my friends, you were created to succeed.